to the Board of Public Works, Edward R. Roybal, hearing room. Been joined by Honorable Councilmember Paul Krikorian. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Okay. I'm trying to get far from the mic so I'm not all garbled. But as you can tell, the acoustics are not the greatest here. And as such, if you have a conversation, it's really hard to hear. So if you would, please, if you need to have a conversation, take it outside so that we can hear the speakers and you can hear us and have a more informed committee and not everybody laugh at one time. But, okay. But when you do come to the microphone, give us your name and address. I know many of you have worked on eloquent letters, but you do have 2 minutes on the clock. The clock is to your right. And if you can get to your point, that would be great within those 2 minutes. If the previous speaker has already made your point, it's okay to say, I agree with the previous speaker, and give us something new or different for the committee to consider. So that being said, let's run through the agenda. And given the cards we have cards on 5 and 6, so we'll call those special. And the following actions are recommended with the approval of my colleague. The first will be a consent item, which is a request the city attorney to prepare and present the ordinance and request the CAO to prepare a report to its fiscal impacts. And that'd be number 1. On number 2, we can move on consent. And that would be to approve the proposed general plan amendment to the Wilmington Harbor City Community Plan to remove the MR1 designation, thereby approve the concurrent zone change from QMR1-1VL to TQCN-1VL for the proposed construction of a residential development for property at 25941 and 25949 South Ballport Avenue, subject to conditions of approval per the action of the council on February 19th, 2010. I think there's a question on the T, but we'll make the adjustments between now and council, but that would be a consent item. The T is fine, so we're good. So that will be a consent item if approved. Number 3, we will continue in Plum to June 15th and council June 30th. On 4, we'll continue in Plum to October 5th. And hopefully in council October 20th, 2010. 5 and 6 were special. And then 7, director's report. She's not here today, but we always thank her for her presence. And I can get a second on those? We can move those items. Thank you, sir. Subject action is committee, and this closes public hearing on those items as well. So, I understand we have the LAPD with us on item number 5. Is that accurate? Yes? Okay, so let's have the report from staff, and then we'll go to cards. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you speak into the microphone? A little louder. Can't hear you. Where are our technicians?
Nicholas Brown, Associate Zone Administrator.
Okay, not a furlough day.
It was about 11 or 12 years ago that the Office of Zone Administration received complaints about Platinum Live. What the Office of Administration did was to initiate a revocation process. In September of 1999, the Office of Zone Administration imposed conditions. Those conditions were appealed to the City Council. City Council denied the appeal. Subsequently, the operator of Live decided to sue the city. The Superior Court dismissed the case, and in doing so, that triggered Live having to come back for a plan approval. In February of 2004, Live came back for approval of plans review, and the Office of Administration again determined that it was a public nuisance and reinstated the prior conditions, and that that again was appealed. The City Council denied the appeal, sustained the zoning administrator's decision, and in doing so, that triggered P-Live having to come back again. This is PA2 for review. In that review, again, the Office of Zoning Administration found that P-Live was a nuisance to the community, and that triggered having to come back for PA3, and that's where I came in. As the zoning administrator, I held a public hearing. At that public hearing, the evidence that was presented to me did not enable me to determine that there was even an operation of P-Live. I heard complaints of nuisance. However, the operator of P-Live said that they have been operating sometimes as a catering facility or catered facility or a promoter facility, but they have not had any impact to the surrounding community. The thing that was lacking from the public record is that in each case when someone comes in for an approval of plans, they are to provide to us information that shows that they're in substantial compliance. There was nothing that was submitted to me at the public hearing as shown in the administrative record. Therefore, what I did was to reinstate the conditions of the prior approval. Nothing changed. And what you have before you today is appeal of that decision. This item has been continued 14 times at Plum. It was originally on the agenda, I believe, July 2008. I think it is time for closure on this. What I wish to ask is for Plum to deny the appeal and to sustain the zoning administrator on this action. What that will do is reinstate the prior conditions, including P-Live having to come back for a public hearing in 6 to 12 months. And at that time, if there's a change of operator, we will consider maybe modifying the conditions to meet that operator's needs. Or if P-Live is still the operator, they must provide us with the evidence that shows substantial compliance with the conditions of the prior discretionary action.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Any questions, Councilmember? Okay. So let's go to the appellant. And who's representing the appellant?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Roger Diamond. I'm the attorney for the appellant. I did not know until a few minutes ago that I would be appearing today to handle the appeal. There are problems with the person who prepared the appellate papers, David Carlock, could not make it, so I apologize for not coming here dressed in a suit and tie, but it's late notice. But I do have authorization faxed to me to appear.
So you're a California casual, so you're okay.
Thank you. This matter involves a business in North Hollywood. It's in Mr. Kokorin's district. This appeal hearing has been delayed for 2 years, and now apparently there is a slight conflict between the owner of the property on the one hand and my client on the other, who is the tenant. This is a strange case because the owner of the property actually filed for plan approval. The conditions were then changed, and my client, the tenant, has appealed here to overturn the decision of the zoning administrator. We do not want to return to the old conditions. That would make matters worse. As far as I can determine, based upon my review of the case, the neighborhood that originally complained about noise and disruption years ago because of a prior tenant named Aftershock who left years ago, the current tenant has not disturbed the neighborhood, has acted with due regard to the concerns of the neighbors, and is trying to function as a legitimate business. And apparently, I understand from my brief reconnection with this case that the landlord and the tenant are having a dispute, and the landlord is attempting to evict the tenant and is using this process to assist it in its endeavor. And so the tenant is in a difficult position because the tenant did not file the application for site plan approval, which triggered the zoning administrator's hearing, which led him to impose conditions or make a determination that my client, the tenant, is appealing. I'm not sure whether anybody is here from the community to testify on this matter. It's my belief that everything was okay until 2 months ago when the attorney for the landlord obtained some sort of a judgment against the tenant on behalf of a subtenant, and from there it gets convoluted. The bottom line is we respectfully ask that you reverse the zoning administrator's decision and allow the conditions to be set aside so the business can operate in a very difficult economy where we have thousands of people out of work, thousands of people whose homes are being foreclosed, and the city needs revenue that these kinds of businesses generate so that the public employees can have their pensions funded without fear of the city going bankrupt. And I know that in conclusion, Mayor Villaraigosa has even appointed a special czar to override the various departments of the city that do not have the economic well-being of the community in their radar screen, because everybody seems to be moving in a different direction. We need some coherent policy on the part of the city that's business-friendly, that doesn't shut businesses down right and left simply because we have a city whose zoning is a little mixed up because residential properties were allowed to be developed right next to commercial strips. But that's another matter. We're trying to operate peacefully.
To say,
Yes.
are you almost done?
I am done, and I want to thank you very much, and I leave 30 seconds for rebuttal. Thank you very much.
We won't have rebuttal, but if we have a question, we will ask you. Thank you, sir, and he's pretty good. Left the rebuttal there. Okay, anybody else for the appellants? Seeing no one else, I'll go through the speaker cards. Does the council office choose to speak now? Oh, okay. Okay, sir. So we'll go down the list. Let's keep our eye on the clock. Lisa Sarkin, Barry Johnson, and then Marlon White Siddle. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good morning, afternoon.
You've been here a
I
while.
believe it's like after 3.
You've been here a while, huh?
Lisa Sarkin, Studio City Neighborhood Council. I'm the chair of the Land Use Committee.
Ms. Sarkin, I apologize, but I do have a police officer here. Can I have him speak first?
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Sarkin. Have the LAPD come on up, because I hate to keep you any longer than we have to. Come on up, sir. Give us your name. Thank you, Ms. Sarkin. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Captain Justin Eisenberg, the Area Commanding Officer, North Hollywood area, and I've got with me Sergeant Gutierrez,
Can you lead
the
into the...
sergeant in
Yeah.
charge of the Vice Unit at North Hollywood area.
Okay.
Sergeant? I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the issues that we've dealt with at this particular location, and then Sergeant Gutierrez is going to get into a little more detail in terms of calls for service and so forth that we've had there. First of all, regarding the comments of the zoning administrator, we concur with his recommendation that you do deny the appeal and that you do reinstate the conditions. I've reviewed the conditions. They are appropriate. In terms of the most significant issue that we've dealt with at this location, this occurred in 2009, June of 2009. This particular banquet hall hosted a major gang party for the Rolling 60s Crips. And because of that event, it required a great response of police resources from our area, from South Central, from 77th Division, and we did arrest 16 people out of this location.
And how long ago did that occur?
That was in June of 2009, sir.
Okay.
So that's a very significant incident that happened there, which concerns us a great deal. If you have any other further questions about issues that we've dealt with there, my sergeant can answer those questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sir?
Hello, Sergeant Michael Gatilla, North Hollywood Vice. As my captain spoke about the incident in June 11th of 2009, it appears to us that that location, since the appeals have been going on, has been operating mainly as a banquet hall, renting the location out, not operating as a nightclub. Prior to that style of operation, I have sheets here of numerous calls for service to that location for everything ranging from minor disputes to grand thefts, GTAs, DUIs, traffic collisions involving DUIs, robberies, and ADWs. And they go back starting as early as 2002 up to the most recent time of 2009. Now, the 2009 run is when they were mainly operating as a banquet hall and renting the facility out to customers such as the Rolling 60s gang party. The calls for service while they were operating as a banquet hall have dropped significantly, but operating as a banquet hall, you still have a responsibility of who you rent to and your clientele, and it provides safety for everyone. That party, like my captain said, resulted in 16 arrests. 11 of those were for parole violations, 2 were for probation violations, and 5 were for warrants. All of the suspects that were arrested had some affiliation with a criminal street gang. As you can see here, a photo taken of the sign outside of the Platinum, and it says Nipsey Hussle 6 by 10 or 6 times 10, which stands for Rolling 60s, and it was their hood day, and in gang terminology, that's the birthday of the gang, and they get together yearly and celebrate that, and that year they decided to celebrate it at the Platinum nightclub. It's the stance of the department and of North Ohio Advice that the conditions be reinstated, and we support the zoning administration on this. We don't need any more burden placed on the already strapped department.
What did I ask you? This is an example of one occurrence. So we had this type of activity, but can it be said, in your experience, although they may not have been gang affiliated, have been there other functions and activities that also creates a burden on your resources?
There are all sorts of functions that can create that burden. Operating just as a banquet hall and renting out for private functions lessens that likelihood that type of activity could occur. And as I see, we have 336 ABC locations within North Hollywood Division. And along Ventura Boulevard, there are numerous types of clubs and restaurants who change from a restaurant during the day to a quote-unquote nightclub at night. And they attract different promoters to bring in different clientele to raise money, because that's how businesses run. They run on money. Now, the people that they bring in can be different types of people. If they're not allowed to operate as a bona fide nightclub, that significantly decreases the chances or likelihood of it adding any further burden on the department or the surrounding community.
One more question. The assertion here is your posture is being taken because of an array of activities, not just because of one gang-affiliated event.
Correct.
I just want to say that for the record, because I want to be very clear as to your posture and the reasons for asserting yourself in the way you have.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. One more thing. The location has also been cited several times for drunk service to obviously intoxicated person, adulterated bottles, which are bottles that have bugs or foreign debris inside the bottles.
Okay. Councilman, any questions from our officers? 4 officers?
Well, I think the fact that our captain has come out for today sends a pretty strong signal about the importance that the division places on this and that LAPD places on this particular site. So, Captain, thank you for coming out, both of you for coming out and testifying. I think one observation, there may have been a decline in the number of calls, but that also would be directly related to the fact that the business is operating on fewer nights now as a banquet hall.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So that there may be a reduced frequency, but when it's operating, the reduced frequency doesn't indicate necessarily that there's better operations going on, only that it's operating on fewer nights. Is that a fair?
Very fair.
Assumption? Okay. Now, in fairness to the operator, when you say a Rolling 60s event takes place, that sends up a lot of pretty dramatic red flags for me. But is there any indication of that you're aware of, that there was awareness on the part of the operator of what type of function that was going to be before the business made it available to these gangsters, or that there's any kinds of other affiliation like that?
I would assume, well, for that event, obviously by the picture I showed you with the sign posted in front of their location, that's a sign way up. That's not something that the renters themselves would come and post
I'm
up.
sorry,
So,
I couldn't see that probably even.
I'm sorry.
If it were up close with my glasses on, but let me, if I could see that, please.
Just pass it over to the clerk and she'll give it to the council member. Thank you.
That's something I would believe that the clients renting the location would have to discuss with the management and have them post for them for the evening.
Wow, okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, officers, and be careful. So, Ms. Sarkin, take two. All right.
I have my camera here because I forgot to get a picture taken. I forgot to do it. So anyway, if you want to see how they have been charging for the valet, which they're not allowed to do in the conditions, I do have a picture of that. But let me say that I totally agree with the policeman. I totally agree with Mr. Brown. The neighborhood council, and you have a motion from 2008, January of 2008, in front of you, and the SCNC opposes the modifications to the existing conditions. And we do because there's never been any banquet or whatever's going on in that particular location. There's always something wrong. I get all the phone calls and the emails from the neighbors, so it's a constant problem. The police are called when it's the most serious thing, but the other things are, I was on Ventura Boulevard and one of the valets just went right across all the lanes of traffic to go onto one of the streets to park a car there, maybe, but that's not where they're allowed to park. There's always something wrong. And as for they haven't been regularly open for years, so how can they bring in any type of document to the ZA saying that they have complied with the conditions? Because they don't. I was going to tell you about the gang party. You already know about that. And also with the current operation, they have super graphics that are on the side of the building that they've been cited for that have not been removed. So, we're trying as hard as we can to clean up that entire area of Studio City, especially on Ventura Boulevard. We would love to have a club that actually follows the rules, and that's why those rules were put on. I would hate to go back to the situation we were where it took 5 years to get all the conditions that are placed on the property now. And I can go now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harkin. Barry Johnson, good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder, and I would hope that you would deny the appeal. We heard the appellant mention the well-being of the business community. How about the well-being of the single-family community which surrounds this establishment, both to the south of Ventura Boulevard by just a couple hundred feet? To the north, all we have is literally this club's backyard is the LA River, followed by vast single-family neighborhoods. And it just seems like the single-family neighborhood most of the time is the last to be listened to in terms of how it affects quality of life and peace and tranquility in our backyards, that in the summertime, if you want to be out in your backyard into the evening, to be subjected to some of the things we've been subjected to over the years, it just seems like we're the last people to ever be considered, yet we surround this community. And to me, it seems like for Studio City, the single-family homeowner is the backbone of that community, if anything is. So I just, again, hope you will deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Marilyn White-Siddle, good afternoon, ma'am.
Marilyn White-Siddle. I'm a resident of Colfax Meadows for 53 years. Seen a lot of changes in Colfax Meadows, on the boulevard. A lot of them not so good. This one in particular is really terrible for our neighborhood. And I came today out of a sick bed to support the people south of Ventura Boulevard, up into the hills, where they're not supposed to park, and they do park. They do that in the flats. People just don't really care. But I'm here really to support what they want, absolutely 100%. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Sheldon Sloan. And then we have Willie Belmer. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Krikorian. Congratulations. I haven't
Thank
seen
you. Good to see you, Shelley.
I filed a written brief, so I'm not going to take all your time to read it, but I represent the landowner who also agrees with the zoning administrator and the police and the neighborhood. We're in the process of preparing a 3-day notice to evict this tenant. The tenant has been very difficult. They have paid their rent, but they're in breach of so many parts of the lease, and I'm just going to enumerate a few that I've written down. One, the tenant is a corporation that has been suspended since 2007 for failure to file and pay their state income taxes. I heard an argument from Mr. Diamond who says we have a slight disagreement. It's not a slight disagreement. I suspect, as he says, that you need to have taxes paid in Los Angeles. I suspect that if you run the taxes, you probably haven't received a penny from this taxpayer. Additionally, their ABC license is suspended because you can't have an ABC license if you don't have a legitimate corporation. It also came to our attention they were buying their liquor at Costco, which is a violation of the ABC license. The roof leaks and is out of compliance. It's unsafe and is tagged. They owe $30,000 plus to the Department of Water and Power of the City of Los Angeles, which means the water's shut off, which means it's a fire hazard. 5 minutes before this hearing, I received a call from the fire department. They've been trying to get into the property for several weeks in order to inspect it. We've made arrangements to get them into the property, but I suspect they'll red tag it because the sprinklers won't work because there's no water. Have I said enough yet?
I think you ran the course there in 2 minutes, so.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Rudy Belmer, and then Art Howard. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm a longtime resident of Studio City, and the home which I have on Tropical Drive is literally across the street from the Platinum Live. And it's on Tropical Drive. It's a half a block away, actually, south of where the club is. And I can tell you that it has been a perilous journey because there's not enough parking. So they're parking illegally. Now, I'm not speaking of recently because of these restrictions that were put on them. There's only so much they can do. And of course, they are having these private events on occasion and also the theater number and the banquets. But what happens when you open up all this again, if indeed it would ever happen, and hopefully not, is that we have people wandering about the neighborhood, parking illegally. When they exit the club, you can hear them all over the place. You can hear the noise from the club, even though it's supposedly soundproof. It isn't soundproof. Doors are open so people can go out and have a smoke. The front doors are constantly opening. The drums you can always hear. And it has been not a good experience. Now, again, I'm speaking of someone who's been there for a very long time and been through different clubs. And I'm sure that you've heard enough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Art Howard, Studio City Residents Association. Naturally, I agree with everything that's been said before me, but it's hard for you to see the picture of what the community has lived through in the years that this operation has been there. Those conditions were put on for really valid reasons, and we're really opposed to removing them for any reason whatsoever. With the capacity of the club and the lack of parking on site and the way the neighborhood is, they really can't get parking anywhere for their customers, so it's just a bad location for this sort of business. I have a letter, it should be in the file, from a property owner of the shopping center at Tahunga in Ventura, and the valet for one of the events parked the cars there. And all the tenants got upset. They called the property owner, and they called the police to have all the cars towed out of their lot. But there's no regard whatsoever. These conditions kind of give us a breath of life, but the property operators have no concern for any of the conditions. They just simply do anything they want, and whatever they want is fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Lord Allen, last but not least.
My name is Mort Allen, and believe it or not, I do have a life besides Carmen Trutanich. I've been a Studio City realtor for 48 years. I actually want to just give you a quick background. This club was first opened in 1935 as Larry Potter's Supper Club. In 1960, it was Bob Eubank's Cinnamon Cinder. In 1970, it was the Point After. And then in 1980, I sold the building to the Chen and Chin families, who opened up Sash, which was a very elegant supper club. And unfortunately, they had marital difficulties, and they hired an attorney by the name of Noel Weiss, who leased the property to Moscow Nights, which was a Russian nightclub, and it operated for about 8 or 9 years, and we had a lot of problems there. And they turned around and they changed it to Aftershock, which was a heavy metal nightclub. That's when the conditions first came on the property. And then in late 99, Noel represented all sides and leased it to Platinum Live, telling them they could open up an adult nude club there. They spent $2 million remodeling the building, and of course, he never told them you have to be in the M1 zone to have adult entertainment. So they decided to go around it and do private parties and do filming in there, internet filming. And there's been nothing but a problem. We've had the property for sale for 3 years. We have everybody standing along to buy it, but they're scared to death of the tenant because of they're from back east and whatever it is. So I was the actual applicant on this 2 years ago when we had it sold to David Lillian, who's going to open up a really beautiful restaurant there. And after 3 months in escrow, we could not get these guys to sell. They just backed out of selling the business. So the sale fell apart, and at that point, I spoke against this. And as far as I'm concerned, we have Will Smith wants to buy it. We have Sit and Sleep wants to put a furniture store there. We have all kinds of buyers, and we finally got rid of Noah Weiss and hired the Lewis Boy law firm.
Thank you, sir.
Who was doing the eviction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, that concludes the public hearing on this item. Do you have any questions for the staff, Councilmember? Any questions from the staff, or like to call the staff back up, or are you ready to act on this one?
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions. This has been a very long process, as staff has described, and while I appreciate the difficult position that Mr. Diamond has put in, being asked to come and appear on very short notice.
Without a tie.
Nonetheless, there's been no showing here or before the ZA or in other recent proceedings of any justification for modifying the conditions. No evidence indicating that there is a justification for changing those conditions or a need, because there's been no statement even today as to why these particular conditions inhibit the successful operation of a business at this site. Now, Mr. Diamond did talk about assisting businesses and creating jobs, and that's true, but if it's true, as Mr. Sloan said, that this is a business that has its liquor license suspended, is a corporation not in good standing, that's not the kind of business that we're trying to encourage. And in fact, the surrounding neighborhood and the businesses in the surrounding neighborhood have concerns that we need to be protecting as well. This is a village community where it's a family-friendly area that people like to come to in the evenings. They're not going to be as willing to do so when we have a troublesome club there that's causing even occasional problems. So I agree with the staff recommendation, and I think the appeal should be denied.
And I'll second that motion, and that'll be the action of this committee. Okay, we're ready for the next item?
Next item, council members, is item 6, which is an appeal by Paul Edelman, who's representing the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy. This relates to a track map appeal for a 120-unit condo project on CD4.
Good afternoon, committee members. Maya Zaitsevsky, Deputy Advisory Agency, Planning Department. This case was heard twice over the past year before me. The first hearing we had, it was a tract map for 120-unit condominium and some zoning administrator adjustments. At the hearing, a lot of concerns were raised about the state of the property right now. If you're familiar with it, on Riverside Drive, there's a big retaining wall that gets covered in graffiti. There's homeless encampments. There's drugs being made on the property, and the neighbors brought up concerns about biological resources if this project is built, air quality impacts because it's next to the freeway, and geological concerns. So I closed the hearing and asked them to prepare new environmental documents covering these issues that were brought up. They did that. We had a new hearing. One of the other issues that was of concern to the community was a horse trail that's shown on the community plan that appears to sort of meander through the property. The Conservancy was there in support of myself requiring a horse trail on the property. The council office came and they were in support of the project and did not support the horse trail. Councilmember LaBonge went out to the site, hiked it, did not feel that the topography lent itself to a horse trail, and the lack of connectivity to the other horse trails was a problem. And so I...
It does not connect.
It does not, yeah, there's no connections. The slope is 2-to-1. There's rock outcroppings. There's single-family homes that have encroached into this property, so it's not ideal for having a horse trail. I could not find any authority to require a horse trail with this property to have an easement for the Conservancy to use a horse trail. I'm sympathetic to their concerns, but I could not. I spoke to the city attorney's office, and there was nothing compelling. The community plan shows little horse trails in the area, but it doesn't give us the authority to require it as part of a subdivision. Other community plans, the Sunland Tahunga Community Plan map and the San Gabriel Verdugo Mountains specific plan have very specific language that the decision maker is supposed to take into consideration with these things. So I approved the map, did not require the horse trail, and now this is the appeal before you is by the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, so I'll let them speak and then respond to any comments you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the representative for the appellant? Please give us your name for the record.
Honorable members, I'm Paul Edelman, Deputy Director of Natural Resources and Planning for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair, just to give me a sense of what to say? Can I have 4 to 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
It's an important...
There's a little more on the floor side.
Okay.
Okay.
I plead with you, how could you find a case where there's a better nexus to exact a trail than this case? Please, and if I run out of time, please ask me what those questions are and look at our appeal for what that nexus is. Second thing, I don't think there is a very few handful of people who do not want this trail. It's a very small contingent of people in the city. The second thing is the Conservancy's request with this appeal is that it will cost this developer no money whatsoever. And probably the third, very most important thing that rebuts everything that Ms. Zavitsky just said is that part of this application and the grading plan produces a 15-foot terrace that runs the entire, flat terrace, that runs the entire back length of this development. Okay. 15 feet wide, flat, up away from the project, and it's contiguous. The trail is built. It's part of their plan. The issue is not feasibility. It's desirability. That's the key thing. And they're going to say that this is a random trail. It's not a random trail. It's been on the community plan for 20 years. In 1981, Councilman Ferrara supported state legislation to make this trail the El Pueblo to Griffith Park Trail. It went through a big process. And in 1983, the state legislation was passed, and the Conservancy submitted the map to the city clerk. This whole green belt between Elysian Park and Griffith Park is a fantastic city resource. And before you two today is the recommendation to the council whether or not to throw that in the trash. If you look at the Google Earth and just fly it, you'll be impressed at what is there and how much potential is there. It's imperfect, but in terms of saying, hey, what good is a trail segment that's all by itself, you have to start somewhere, and examples of where trails that are being used are to the south along the red car line.
Keep going.
Standalone sections are critical to begin any trail segment. So these are all the reasons why the Conservancy is going against the council member today for this important trail. In deference to Council District 4, we have the idea of potentially granting the appeal and not having this trail open for 5 to 10 years to allow the development to mature, for people to get a handle on the crime, have it fenced off, and just have wildlife-friendly fencing to get from one side of the property to the other. How can we, it's not a black and white issue, no trail or trail. I think we need to reserve this trail easement for the public, for the good of the city, go through a waiting period, and possibly have a trigger point where crime statistics within a mile might trigger opening the trail, or when the council member feels comfortable. This trail is feasible, and there are 3 alternatives there in front of you that show whether we can get it away from the apartment building or the condos to get a little bit of distance. But remember, this thing is cut into a slope with 50-foot high retaining walls. You get that 50 feet high, it makes P2, P3, P1, and P4 under City Hall look like little doll houses. And only one of those levels of those apartments would be affected by the trail in the back. Even though it's close proximity, it will still work. And you know what? We feel like this applicant is getting so much that they need to give the public more for what they're providing. So we urge you to grant our appeal. Remember, it's no loss of money to the developer, ideally to instruct staff before it goes to council to work with a set of conditions that get the trail corridor, hopefully, to the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, and that the easement be built before they file for grading permits, and that the trail be constructed prior to any certificate of occupancy. The Conservancy would even finish the portions that are not behind this set of apartments. And then, this trail is so valuable to the public. For 10 years, lock it up for 10 years. Nobody has to worry about crime. Councilman Labange doesn't have to worry about crime. And then, when conditions, quote, get better, open it up, because it's a great resource. And we need to finish off the rest of it, both to the north and the south. I don't know whether I'm out of time or not, but the nexus, I mean, it's on
you are. I think I'm giving you a lot of rope here, so.
All right, anyhow, it's a great public resource. There's a zone variance. They're getting 120 units. It's been on the community plan for that long, and this isn't an arbitrary trail. It's been there. I mean, the city's been working on it for that many years. To rest our case. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's the representative for the appellant, and we'll go into public cards. I'm assuming the council wants to speak last? Yes, okay. So we'll go with Isa K. Mixon. Well, I'm just going through the list. Why don't you come on up? Isa? Isa.
Isa K. Mixon, 1028 and a half Laguna Avenue, Los Angeles. The community and the Citizens Committee to Save Elysian Park have been trying to get this trail for many, many years. It is not a new item. Now, you wanted another perspective. I just came from the Finance and Budget Committee meeting, trying to defend no cuts to the youth programs, to the gang interventionist prevention and youth services. Well, I see the connection. As we cut off all of the green space and make it less and less, we are depriving the youth for any future to enjoy, and the trails idea is just so marvelous. And to see it curtailed this way would be a tragic loss to the city.
Thank you, sir. Diane Edwardson. Good afternoon.
I'm Diane Edwardson, 2630 Corralitos Drive, Los Angeles, 90039. I have led the neighborhood for 18 of the 20 years I've lived in Silver Lake, in the same location. I am in favor of the appeal. I urge you to vote to support the appeal. We, as a part of the community plan and the community planning process, saying that something's on the map that the city produced, and it's a document in the public record, is enough to say that it is there. Now, in my letter that I submitted today, attachment A comes from the first community plan, Silver Lake Echo Park Community Plan. It includes the map book pages that indicate the horse trail going through exactly as it is described in the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy 1983 memo that is Exhibit D in my file. That is, as Sally Neubauer and Virginia Adams were among the people who walked that trail in 1983. I also included, Exhibit B is the plan amendment date log from 1991, and it does not show that the trail was added after 1984 when the community plan was first accepted and passed by the city council. It matches exactly, if you hold the new community plan updated in 2004, it matches the plan from the first community plan prior to the update. 1981, I included the legislation from John Ferraro, as well as language from the Rec and Parks section of the current community plan. Future development should additionally negotiate new and preserve existing rights-of-way and easements, such as the existing equestrian trail that runs along the Pacific Electric right-of-way.
I'm sorry, the reference to John Ferraro was what year?
It is the Exhibit E, Council File Number 81-2700-S38.
Okay.
And
can you conclude, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you conclude?
It's also in the Hollywood master plan, community plan, the horse trail north of north of Glendale Boulevard to Griffith Park.
Okay.
And photographs showing the trail use on property south of the south of Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sally W. Neubauer.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chair Reyes and co-chair. I've submitted a letter. I hope you've read it. I was one of the original members in the 1983 group, and I walked this trail several times with other community members. There were two alternatives that were studied at the time, one along the LA River and one along Riverside Drive that involved the red car line right-of-way. This right-of-way still exists, and it's still viable today. I can't tell you how important it is to realize, especially you, Mr. Reyes, as a planner, that this trail was considered very seriously by the planning department and by the members of the community, and that is why it was included in the Echo Park Silver Lake Elysian Valley plan. And it was misstated earlier at the beginning of this hearing that this is not included with language in our plan, because our plan does say that the recommendation is that negotiated easements along the red car right-of-way be part of the negotiation with any development along Riverside Drive. That language is in our Echo Park Silver Lake plan, and clearly this is a property that involves that. I want to state also that trail use in '83 was very, very far different than it is now. If you go into Elysian Park, you'll see tons and tons of people on the trails now, every morning and every afternoon. This trail would be a tremendous asset to any community that's near it. People would use it, it would be safe. The more that people use it, the safer it gets. It would be a fantastic asset, and I urge you not to lose it. If indeed you do not want to grant this appeal, you must at least ask the developer to file for a general plan amendment so that we would have a better communication with the city about this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wes Joe. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. This is a very complex case, and I want to thank the staff for all the obvious time and effort they put into analyzing it. Also want to thank the applicant. They put a lot of time and effort into answering many of the community concerns, but I am a little concerned about the disregard for the trail. I have two unrelated concerns. I don't know if you're able to consider those, but I hope you are. They have to do with paragraph 16 of the approval letter, specifically subparagraph D regarding air filtration. There is no requirement for maintenance of the MERV level 13 air filters, and this is right next to the Golden State Freeway, a freeway that gets a lot of diesel truck traffic. I hope that you can add a maintenance requirement. Also, no specific mention that this is being done because of the proximity of the freeway. I'm hoping that because this is recorded, this will serve as a flag. There's no filters being manufactured that can fit into a standard FAU. So at some point, because MERV level 13 requires quite a lot of air pressure to get the air through there may be a temptation for future owners to replace the MERV level 13 with MERV 11 or even MERV 8 filters to save money, and they need to know that that's required to protect the health of the occupants. Also, regarding the median landscaping in paragraph 16J, we did want some trees planted in the median, and there is no requirement for maintenance of the landscape median. I think in January of 2009, Gail Goldberg did send a memo to the City Planning Commission calling for dense landscaping. This has been found to absorb particulate pollution, which is one of the most hazardous forms of pollution that's coming off that freeway. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. MERV is a minimum efficiency rating value, right? MERV is minimum efficiency rating value.
Efficiency
value.
Yeah.
Okay, it's for the record, we know what we're talking about. Okay, Barry Coppola?
Yeah, I'm the attorney. They're the ones that made the legal arguments. I happen to have lived on the property for 22 years.
So you are the attorney or not?
The east, no, actually, my sartorial splendor. I carry a tie, Mike, unlike Mr. Diamond.
All right.
I'm part of this community. I lived on the southeast end for 9 years. I've lived on the northwest end now on Edelman Avenue, directly over the property for 13 years. This is so much a part of our community that to deny its existence is to really take away so much that we have. My current tenant, who was homeless, who lived there for years, was given the opportunity to find a place to live. My late companion who's an Olympic sprinter, used to run the property. We have homeless people, we have community activists, people who walk their dogs. This property, this trail is so integral to what is going on in our Silver Lake originality that to deny its existence is absurd. And as to take away the part of the essence of LA, it would be like saying, let's change the zoning for Philippe's. Let's just get rid of it because it's archaic and people don't eat meat anymore. This trail has to remain. And it's an emotional argument that I'm making, not a legal argument. I think their legal arguments are much better than anything I could say. But you have to live there to appreciate the value to all of us in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Coppola. Mary Ann Cook? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Ann Cook. I live at 2011 West Silver Lake Drive and have done so for 22 years. Been a community activist for 20 and a member of both the Silver Lake Residents Association Board and the Committee to Save Silver Lake's Reservoirs. I absolutely agree with everything everyone else has said in favor of the appeal. I've changed my remarks because you don't want duplicates. I'll just tell you a little story. 15 years ago, when the Committee to Save was attempting to perhaps make a safe walking path around Silver Lake Reservoir. The council member was not particularly in favor of that either. But we progressed, and as you may or may not know, there's now almost 80% of the path, safe separate walking path around Silver Lake Reservoir. It is open 24/7. There are hundreds, I may even say thousands of people who use that path. Now, this path isn't the Menlo property path isn't connected in any way, except emotionally. Many times we were told it can't be done. It's too much money, it's too much work, it will be safe. Outsiders will come. I absolutely agree, outsiders do come. And they park in front of my house in their BMWs, in their Priuses, in their Hondas, on their motorcycles, and they walk across the street and walk around the reservoir. People in our community are desperate for nice walking spaces. I agree that it may be a 10-year project, but everything that we do, the community does with the city, is a 10-year project. The only one that broke that 10-year rule is the library. It only took 9 years and 9 months.
Only.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. George Grace, and then Cindy Ortiz.
I'm George Grace. I live at 3864 Clayton Avenue. I am a member of the board of the Franklin Hills Residents Association. I'm a member of the Griffith Park Master Plan Working Group. I'm here to support the appeal. I don't represent the hikers. I don't represent the equestrians. I represent the wildlife of the city of Los Angeles. I don't know where any of you live, but if you live as I do in a hillside community, we have animals there. And if this trail is destroyed, it's going to destroy the animals in Elysian Park by cutting them off ecologically from the rest of the Santa Monica Mountains. It will have a detrimental effect on the wildlife in Griffith Park and the whole Santa Monica Mountains area. And I feel very, very passionately that you should not kowtow to this man, Menlo, who has a terrible reputation that you can see on the LA Times, who have a complete dossier on him. So please support this appeal and do not let developers take precedent over the interests of the people, the citizens, and the wildlife of our city.
Thank you, sir. Cindy Ortiz. Good afternoon, how are you?
I wish to allot my time to Mr. Paul Edelman.
I can't do that.
You can't do that? Okay. I absolutely love, well, okay, thank you. Cindy Ortiz, 1940 Walcott Way, Los Angeles, 90039. I have an absolute love for open space. I have an absolute respect for open space. Every Friday afternoon, I donate 4 hours of my time at the Echo Park Farmers Market. I operate a small coloring table. I am by no stretch of the imagination an artist. But in talking to these young children who enjoy their crayons and their pieces of white paper, they are coming to realize for the first time the connection where fruits and vegetables and plants come from. They have such an interest in open space and understanding where things come from that Ralph's, you just don't go to the supermarket to pick things up. There is an absolute connection. When I look into the faces of these children every Friday, I know for a fact where the next generation of stewards are coming from. Please protect our open space for the future of the young people of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I'd like to call up Kevin McDonald.
Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Kevin McDonald, the law firm Jeffer, Mangles, Butler, and Marmorell, representing the owner and subdivider, the Menlo Trust. As the Deputy Advisory Agency mentioned to you, this is a condominium project for 120 units on what is really the second phase of a project that was approved in the 90s. Immediately adjoining our property to the north on Riverside Drive is an existing 157-unit apartment building, and it's included in part of our project description because of other related entitlements, but it is the subject of the MER 14 upgrades that we were talking about. So as I progress, I'll explain how that is included as a public benefit. I do want to let you know that we have a number of our consultants here who contributed to an expanded environmental review, so if you have specific questions of them, they're available. The appellant focuses their appeal primarily on general plan consistency, claiming that merely because there is no trail mandated through this property that it is somehow deemed inconsistent with the general plan. This property is actually located in the Silver Lake, Echo Park, Elysian Valley Community Plan area, and the only reference to a trail in that plan is a random notation on one of the drawings in the plan maps, and one or two vague textual references to equestrian trails. There is absolutely no reference to pedestrian trails, as the Conservancy has mentioned, and as I say, only vague references that are non-specific to equestrian trails. Government Code Section 65860A provides that the standard of review for a general plan consistency is that you only find that there is general harmonious compliance with the policies and regulations included in the general plan, and that you are not to focus on one particular, not even a stated policy. In this case, in the May 4th letter that I sent to this committee, if I could just have about 30 seconds.
Sure, go ahead.
I made at least 10 references to very specific policies and goals and objectives that appear in the general plan that this project falls on all fours on in furthering them. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy finally complains about the environmental review. What was mentioned by the advisory agency was that the first hearing held on July of 2009 was actually suspended specifically to request an expansion of the environmental review for an air quality study, a biological assessment study, a study of the geologic conditions, including slope stability, and a land use study related to residential density and the feasibility of an equestrian trail. In January of 2010, those issues were brought back before the advisory agency, showing that there were no significant environmental impacts. Finally, I just want to mention a number of the public benefits that this project will provide. We have volunteered to install a landscape median in the center of Riverside Drive to the maximum length that the Department of Transportation will allow with the appropriate turnouts, et cetera, for safety. At this point, our plan showed about 900 feet long at this point. It will be landscaped, irrigated, and maintained by the homeowners of the condominium project. We have also volunteered to upgrade the existing 157-unit apartment building with the MER 13 air filtration system. And finally, the wall that you heard was such an eyesore on the southerly part of the property, it's approximately 14 feet high, is a remnant of the Building and Safety ordered slope stability remediation. We have volunteered to cut that down to a freeboard of no more than 2 feet above grade and landscape it over. And one last thing, I think there are a couple of neighbors here to speak about lot line adjustments that we have volunteered to cooperate with fully. These are neighbors that live on Waverly Drive immediately behind the project. For a number of years, there's been encroachments that have been unaddressed. So this project will address those encroachments by adjusting the property lines as appropriate in full cooperation with those neighbors, not asking for a dime for any of the several thousand square feet of land that will be deeded over to those adjoining property owners.
When you built this project, who was going to be the resident? Like, who would be living here? Like, what income group? Is there any affordability at all?
This is a market rate project.
Market rate? So, give me a profile, an economic profile of who would live here.
I think you're going to see people that very much represent the profile that are there already. As I said, it's a market rate project, and what that means to me is it's the market of the community. The people.
So give me a range.
You want an income range?
Yeah.
I can't honestly give you that. I don't have that with me. I can ask some of my consultants, and if we have
I'll probably ask that again. So
Pardon me?
I will ask that again, so if you can get that out, I would appreciate that.
Yes, I'll find that out.
So is there any affordability at all?
It's not built in for any density bonus or low-income housing component. It's, as I said, 100% market rate.
So it's not affordable.
It's affordable.
And given the income ranges that exist in the city,
it clearly would make home ownership available to a large segment of the community. And as I say, in determining market rate, we look at the market in the vicinity and the region where the housing is being provided. So it's affordable to the vast majority of people who live in this region.
when you give me those numbers, that'll be interesting to compare.
I will
Your statement versus what is factual.
Yeah, and the 120 unit count is allowed as a matter of right under the density. It's an RD2 density.
I understand.
So,
but as a councilman who's always in a situation where people ask me, where can I live and what can I afford, I'd like to have an answer. And if they point to this facility as it's being built, I can say, well, maybe you could live over there, but this is how much it costs. So it'd be good to have that answer.
Understood.
Okay. All right, Jim Rice.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jim Reese with the land use consulting firm of Craig Lawson and Company. I would just want to respond to a couple of issues that were raised earlier. There was a discussion of whether the median was required to be maintained, and our ZA approval does actually require the maintenance of the median. Kevin had indicated we were retrofitting the existing building to MERV 14. That's actually MERV 13. And to answer your question about income levels, we anticipate the sale of these condos would range for the one bedrooms. There's 1 and 2 bedrooms that would range from about $300,000 to $500,000.
A one bedroom, 300,000?
We believe at this time, but again, it's
to 500,000.
Yes, we believe that's based. We'll have to see what the market is once this project gets built.
Interesting. Okay.
And I will also, I'm the land use consultant who put together the application, so if you have any other questions regarding the project, I'm happy to answer them, but at that, I'll leave my comments.
Thank you. Steve Nelson.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Nelson. I'm the Director of Biological Services for PCR Services Corporation, who did the biological assessment for the applicant. Our address is 1 Venture, Suite 150, Irvine, California, 92618. And because it came up, discussion about or comments about the wildlife corridor, I thought I'd make some clarifying comments. I'm the first one to acknowledge that connectivity between habitat blocks is vitally important for the maintenance of strong and diverse gene pools and therefore wildlife populations. I'm not contending that at all, or that that's wrong. But there are 2 major flaws, in my opinion, as to looking at this open space through these areas as a wildlife corridor. First is the context in which they were looking at it. The information that I reviewed on the El Pueblo to Griffith Park Trail and wildlife corridor along Red Car right-of-way only took the segment where this project is proposed in the adjacent apartments. It did not go all the way to Elysian Park, and it did not go all the way to Griffith Park. If you look at that in an aerial view, you'll see several major roads, you'll see commercial buildings, and you'll see the Glendale Freeway, I think it is, that literally act as barriers to disrupt the movement. The second thing that's flawed is that they're implying that the wildlife are only going to move down this narrow open space. If any research on wildlife movement corridors imply that they have to be very wide, and if they're restricted over long periods or long distances, that the wildlife use is not concentrated there. Now, anybody who lives in a suburb is going to know that raccoons and possums and even coyote can move around in suburbs. Our contention is that it's not this open space that represents any kind of a movement opportunity for wildlife, but you have to look at the whole thing. You have to look at the homes with their mature vegetation and their trees. And I like to look at it in terms of permeability. Permeability for wildlife to move through the area. In lay terms, if you took 4 pipes and one of them you left empty, one of them you put big rocks in, one of them you put sand in, and one of them you put clay in. And those represent the obstacles to wildlife movement, houses, roads, etc., no cover. and then you poured water into each one of them, the water representing the wildlife movement, it'd flow right through the empty pipe. That's with no constraints. It would go fast through the big rocks. It would eventually get its way through the sand, and it probably wouldn't make it for a long time through the clay.
Thank you,
And
sir.
that's the way I look at this whole thing, not just the open space, but the neighborhood surrounding it. Okay?
Thank you.
That's
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vernon Putnam, Willie Felix, Russ Witherby, and then we have the council office.
Good afternoon. My name is Vernon Putnam. I'm with the law firm of Edelman Putnam. I represent a group of homeowners who own homes on Waverly Drive. Waverly Drive is uphill and, if you will, to the rear of the project. We're at the very top of the hill. And at the top of that hill, these homeowners have residences, and they share a rear property line with the project. And what's proposed here by the developer is to essentially consent to lot line adjustments that allows the homeowners there to make their backyards legal. For many years prior to even most of the purchases of these homeowners, the people on Waverly Drive have used that area, which is flat and above the project area, as their backyards. There are spas, ponds, retaining walls, fences, all kinds of other landscaping and other improvements, patios in that area. And although it's never been clear to us where the Conservancy is suggesting where this trail will be, if it is up behind those houses, it is not feasible. First of all, of these property owners, one of them, his backyard is within 6 feet of the retaining wall and the fence that's on top of that retaining wall. So there's really no room for this to begin with. And secondly, some of the homeowners are here today. I'm sorry that Mr. Neil Chortkoff, who has resided on Waverly he and his mother for more than 30 years, couldn't be here. He has a medical condition. But he testified at the January hearing about the problems they've had there with graffiti and homelessness and fires and other kinds of problems, and over the years these homeowners have had to try to control this area. They've been using it, and they've been trying to control it by themselves, and first of all, the thing is so steep you couldn't walk along there with horses, certainly, and so what they're proposing is to regularize this for the homeowners. We support the project.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Willie Felix. Russ Witherby.
Hello, my name is Rudy Felix, and I live at 2617 Waverly Drive. We bought that house about 6-7 years ago. We live between where they're planning to make the condos, and I'm here to oppose the trail. We don't want the trail. What it is it's going to leave like an alley behind our house, and it doesn't allow rangers or it doesn't allow policemen to get up there. Right now we have a homeless problem. There's people making drugs there. That's why we had a recent fire there. So we feel that if there is a trail, there's not going to be anybody to police it. So therefore we're going to have to sit there and do it ourselves, which is not the best situation when there's homeless people. And there's a street on this side and a street on that side. And I know there's people that want the trail and stuff, but they live on the other side, which it won't affect them at all. It really affects us because of the amount of visibility that we're going to have to be always watching it and always having to do the policing there. And I know there's wildlife. I walk at the reservoir all the time. There's Griffin Park. There is Elysian Park. There's 3 big facilities where we can go exercise, walk around. We're less than a mile from Griffin Park, which is one of the biggest parks around. So I agree with, there is wildlife and everything, but we don't have wildlife there in that it's too narrow of a path. We have homeless people and we have a bunch of crime and stuff. So if we can, the people that live there and all the neighbors on Waverly feel the same way because they're the ones that it directly affects. So if we had any say in it or whatnot, we wouldn't want it there because it would really affect us more than it would affect anybody else that lives there. And we paid over 6 years ago $1 million for the home. So it's expensive property that me and my family don't feel we want any. We feel like it's going to be an alley back there, and we all know what happens in alleys, a lot of crime. So I guess that's maybe all the time I have, but if it means anything, the residents don't want it for certain reasons, not because of any profit or loss or anything, just because what it does not bring to the community.
Thank you, Mr. Felix. Thank you very much. Russ Witherby?
Hello, my name is Russ Witherby. I reside at 2625 Waverly Drive. My property actually sits right in the center of the retaining wall situation where, if you look on the map, it shows an A position going upwards. My property sits right in the center of that, of all these encroachments. The space that we're talking about, that open space, is no wider than the open space you're looking at here. I can stretch my arms out from my wall to the retaining wall and basically touch on each side on a sloping area that never really has much safe footing whatsoever. And it only gets steeper and more sustained to landslides and other problems that come up with that area because it is very, very loose ground, and a lot of the walls are actually a little bit falling through a bit because there's so sustainable there. I agree completely with what Rudy says as a homeowner. I don't agree with having this behind my house. There is no space for it technically behind me. Maybe in other places, very little, but where I am, it's literally a skinny little, maybe 4-foot wide area that gives space for passage, which I don't understand that. I understand wildlife, but I don't understand that. When we're talking about open space, we're talking about my backyard. It's not open space that's just sitting there. There's nothing there. Right. So I've spent a lot of time back there cleaning up graffiti and trying to keep up with the trash that's left from homeless people, camps that have been set up over the years. We've had wildfires because of people setting tires on fire in that area. So it has been a problem over the years. So I'm strongly opposed to that being a part of my backyard.
How long have you been there?
I bought in 04.
04? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
And last but not least, the council office, Mr. Doug Minzman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Doug Minzman, representing Councilman Tom LaBonge. And I'm very glad, actually, that some of the Waverly neighbors were able to make it today so you could hear some of the concerns over that's been voiced to our office. As you heard, the councilman walked this area in question with the immediate abutting neighbors to the back.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
When they made reference to John Ferraro working on that map, was he the deputy at the time? Do you know? No?
In 81? I don't know.
Because he was a deputy for John Ferraro for a while.
He was quite a while.
Okay. Okay, I'm just curious.
He might have been still with Mr. Bradley at that
time. I think
the folks are most affected by this.
The councilman will be here any second. You can ask
yeah, exactly.
question.
First and answer.
I should have asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So the greatest concern is those most directly affected. Obviously, conceptually and on paper, this sounds like a really good idea, but it's not something that we feel fits. As kind of stated before, this is a trail that kind of dead ends on two sides and doesn't create a lot of connectivity. The old red car right-of-way, which are now privately held lots, are to the south, but I'm not entirely sure if there is any sort of an easement or horse trail across those properties to connect this further on. The councilman, obviously, would like to work with, really, as part of the river revitalization, keeping the equestrian uses as part of the river and the master plan there and getting that connectivity in that corridor.
And he has made the entrance.
Chair, I want to thank everyone. I also want to thank the Conservancy for past help on many things. But here's our challenge, and you and I talk about this a lot. There's limited dollars. We love the river. All this effort here should be placed on anything we do to make connectivity on the river between Griffith Park and Elysian Park. The horses live on the east side of the river. We've set the bikeway on the west side of the river. If we could vision the equestrians coming down on the east side under, somehow, still to be determined, Los Feliz, under the Sunnybrook Bridge, under the Hyperion Bridge, and somehow pass through whatever method we can to get to Elysian. That is the long vision.
That's the
right now, the horses that used to live on Los Feliz, when I was a kid, the stables burned down. No horses live on the west side of the river at this point here. So this option that may have been great before one building was built only would create a walkway behind a building that I don't think I could support from a physical standpoint after it. I'd rather see money spent here. And even if they looked even the other side of Fletcher, there's opportunity still there because there's nothing impeding it. I just brought a map down which shows, I'm showing you, Ed, showing the public first,
Yes.
this corridor here, that I'd rather see it on that side.
Right.
Okay, so, and then I've got all emails, and it's all been supportive of it.
Right.
But I would just tell you, my challenge is, the crossing which is very serious, the crossing at Fletcher and Riverside is within 100 feet of an intersection. If there was ever a future crossing, it's very close to that. The crossing at Glendale and Riverside is not only a challenge because it's within 100, 200 feet, but it's also at a Y intersection. This is Glendale and this is Riverside, so it's not like a T intersection.
Gotcha.
So you got the picture. I wish I could support it, but I don't think it brings us to an accomplishment. And if they're limited dollars, we got to focus on the river.
I was just curious of asking your deputy that back when John Ferraro was looking at this, and there's some examples of trails that were supported by him, by John Ferraro. I was wondering if you were the deputy at the time.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was the deputy at the time, Ed, because I left John in 92, so I think it was post 92.
Yeah, 81, 82, I think they said.
Yeah, well, you know, I conceivably before that first building was built.
I'm not reading this in my time.
Once the building got built, that building got built, it moved if you could access that land easily enough from Riverside up and around and back down, you can't. It's because it's all going to be sealed off by the buildings.
And that's a tough area.
Trying to build housing.
Changes. Okay.
You know how important housing is.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time because I know you're busy and you got committees.
I wanted to because the one thing too is the Conservancy has been a champion once they realized that with Elmira Canyon and with Ascot and with other areas in the river and your leadership, they've come east. And this is another effort too, but I would rather see them concentrate on helping us because the horses, if you're talking about horses, they live on the east side of the river, so there's no way they have to cross the river and then cross Los Feliz and then cross Riverside Drive and then cross Glendale to get to this point. I would rather see us focus on the east side of the river.
I respect that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the council member? No? Great, well, thank you for taking the time.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, does the deputy want to finish or say it's still with thunder?
Follow that.
It's still with thunder. Great job. Okay, like to come on up. I want to close the loop on the maps because that's a little disconcerting. But I want to know when they were showing the maps that they shown in their presentation. In your review, how did you factor that in, or what was the thought process?
Excuse me. For the record, Maya Zaitsevsky, Deputy Advisory Agency. We reviewed the community plan map. We reviewed the information that was submitted by the Conservancy, but nothing led us to a conclusive feeling that we had the right to take their property and have an easement for horses going across it. Based on a bunch of different things, but there was nothing that said this is how you get this land donated for easement purposes. This is how you can have a horse trail put on this property. And I have nothing against having a horse trail if it's clearly, delineated in the code, in the plan, in the law that the legislature.
So legally, we couldn't make the nexus between what was drawn on the map and the verbiage that's needed to activate and trigger that easement.
I personally could not. Yeah.
Okay. That to me was important because there are illustrations, but I think we also need the legal verbiage to make that nexus. And
what if, I don't know what they would have done, say if this property just remained as it is, this big ugly apartment building and this big ugly retaining wall and these homeless camps, they still can't do anything with it right now. They couldn't put a trail through there as it currently is without purchasing the property.
Right.
They're saying because they're coming before us for a tract map that we should impose this, but like I said, I don't see anything that strongly states that could be a condition of a tract map approval. They're dedicating money towards Quimby fees. Maybe this could go to maintaining a trail on Riverside Drive, on the LA River, something that makes a little more sense.
Okay, and I think the median that will be provided on Riverside is a green strip.
Right. It's a community benefit. It's something that that had no nexus. It was a volunteered condition. We had no requirement for them to put that there, but the community members, it was really important to them to kind of slow down the traffic there, to have a median, to have it be maintained by this homeowners association. So that's a big expense for them. They're getting rid of this huge retaining wall, making it much smaller.
Will the median be maintained?
Yes.
As a green corridor of sorts?
A green corridor?
I mean, the median itself, I mean, nothing exists there except asphalt and
Right.
cement.
Right.
But there will be a green with all the public improvements, curbs.
Right. Yeah,
Nice.
I don't know what it's going to look like because it hasn't been finalized. It's up to DOT to determine, and Bureau of Engineering, what
Do our
exactly.
conditions specify a certain result? Because that's important in the language now before we move it.
Yeah. There's two separate cases with this site. One is a zoning administrator's case that's not before you, but it is a condition of approval of that. There's a condition in the track map that says they're volunteering to provide a landscape median. And then one of the conditions in my ZA case was prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy for that 120-unit condominium project, the applicant shall construct a landscape median on Riverside Drive with input from the Department of Transportation and the Fire Department. The applicant will irrigate the median and maintain the landscaping. But this also, it's volunteered.
Okay. I remember I was going to a bicycle river ride for the river and getting to Griffin Park early in the morning, watching a coyote going through that area. So I think they might walk on that little green strip if they choose to walk on it. But I don't want to make light. This is a very serious issue. But I do know Councilman Labange has a great heart for open space and one of the most consistent members of the River Committee, and he's always advocating for the glory days of Los Angeles and how, I mean, he's a walking historian. A lot of facts and data, so I respect his decision and where he wants to go, and I also know that there's room for negotiation in the future, but at this time I would support the council office on this effort, and essentially support the zoning administrators.
Advisory agency.
Okay, and can we specify the conditions, and Roberto, will be just deny the appeal?
Deny the appeal, Councilman.
Then we're going to action, and do you have a second? Any other comments or observations, Councilmember?
No, I agree with you. Councilmember Labange is the biggest advocate we have for open space, and I don't think I've ever been in opposition to Santa Monica Conservancy in anything in my life, but I lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. Okay. Since that retaining wall went up, this strip of land has really been a problem area. It's been an eyesore. It's all of the land that we're talking about here is already disturbed. This is not native land, and it's surrounded on four sides by development. So I'm just not seeing that this is a wildlife corridor or a genuine throughway with recreational, or trail realistic opportunities. So, but as you say, that there can be further discussions about ways to meet those objectives, and so at this point, I'm prepared to second the recommendation.
Okay, so that'll be the action of this committee. Any other items, Roberto?
No, just public comment. On number 6, Councilman, do you still want the data as to the income issue?
Yes.
Okay.
If I can get that in the report, that would be very much appreciative in understanding who is having access to our housing in the city of Los Angeles. So that being said, anybody have public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.